Have you ever wondered why your elderly relatives seem to prefer staying home rather than visiting friends and family? Or perhaps you've noticed that as people age, they become more selective about their social interactions. This isn't just about getting tired or being antisocial. There are profound reasons rooted in wisdom, experience, and practical considerations that make older adults cautious about frequent visiting. Today, we'll explore the deeper truths behind this age-old wisdom through real stories and insights that might completely change how you view social interactions in later life. These aren't just cultural quirks. They're valuable lessons about boundaries, relationships, and finding peace in our golden years. The transformation of social needs as we journey through life. Our social needs undergo a remarkable transformation. What once brought us joy and energy in our younger years may become sources of stress and exhaustion as we age. This isn't about becoming antisocial or unfriendly. It's about understanding that different life stages require different approaches to relationships and social interactions. Old Mr. Chen, who recently turned 65, explains it perfectly. When I was younger, I thrived on constant social interaction. I loved hosting dinner parties, visiting friends every weekend, and being the center of social gatherings. But now I find that I value quality over quantity. I prefer deeper, more meaningful conversations with a few close friends rather than superficial interactions with many people. This shift reflects a natural evolution in our understanding of what truly matters. With age comes wisdom, and with wisdom comes the recognition that not all social interactions are created equal. The elderly have learned to distinguish between relationships that nourish their souls and those that merely fill time or create unnecessary complications. The preference for solitude or selective socializing isn't about rejection of others. It's about self-preservation and the pursuit of genuine peace. After decades of navigating complex social dynamics, older adults often develop a keen sense of what serves their well-being and what doesn't. When good intentions create uncomfortable situations, one of the most compelling reasons why elderly people avoid frequent visiting lies in the complexity of modern family dynamics. What appears to be a warm invitation from a friend might not reflect the feelings of their entire household, leading to uncomfortable situations that could have been easily avoided. Consider the story of Uncle Wang, a 62-year-old retiree who learned this lesson the hard way. He had reconnected with an old high school classmate who lived in the same neighborhood. Excited about rekindling their friendship, Uncle Wang accepted his friend's invitation for dinner and drinks. The evening went well, and his friend seemed genuinely happy to catch up on old times. Encouraged by this warm reception, Uncle Wang began visiting regularly on weekends, often bringing dishes to share and looking forward to their drinking sessions. However, he soon noticed subtle signs that something wasn't quite right. His friend's wife would give him strange looks, and the atmosphere in the house felt tense whenever he arrived. After several visits, his friend finally had to have an uncomfortable conversation with him. "So, Wang, I enjoy our time together, but my wife and children feel that our weekly drinking sessions are disrupting our family time. They think you're coming over too often, and it's causing problems at home." Uncle Wang was devastated. He realized that what he had interpreted as genuine hospitality was actually just polite courtesy. His friend's initial invitation had been sincere but limited in scope. It wasn't meant to establish a regular visiting pattern that would interfere with family life. This story illustrates a crucial point. In today's complex family structures, one person's invitation doesn't necessarily represent the whole family's sentiment. The elderly, having experienced enough of life's social nuances, often prefer to avoid such potentially awkward situations by limiting their visits to others' homes. Moreover, visiting someone's home in old age carries different implications than it did in younger years. When we're young, casual drop-ins and regular visits are often welcomed as signs of friendship and vitality. But as we age, our presence can sometimes be perceived as burdensome, especially if the hosts feel obligated to entertain us or worry about our comfort and safety. The danger of loose tongues and misunderstood words. Another significant reason why elderly people become cautious about frequent socializing is the risk of miscommunication and the potential for innocent comments to spiral into serious conflicts. Age brings with it a wealth of experiences and opinions, but it also brings the risk of speaking too freely in social situations. The story of Mrs. Lee perfectly demonstrates this concern. After retirement, Mrs. Lee became very active in her community, participating in square dancing and regularly visiting with her neighbors. During one of these social gatherings at a friend's house, the conversation turned to family relationships, particularly the challenges of living with daughters-in-law. In what she thought was casual conversation among friends, Mrs. Lee made an offhand comment about her own daughter-in-law, mentioning that she sometimes lacked initiative around the house and seemed a bit spoiled as an only child. Mrs. Lee meant no real harm. It was the kind of comment that might be made during any casual family discussion. However, somehow this comment found its way back to her daughter-in-law, but in a twisted form. By the time it reached her, the message had transformed into a serious complaint about her character and worth as a family member. The daughter-in-law felt deeply hurt and betrayed, believing that Mrs. Lee had been gossiping about her behind her back. The aftermath was devastating for Mrs. Lee. Her relationship with her daughter-in-law became strained and cold. Her son, caught in the middle, scolded his mother for what he perceived as inappropriate gossip. The harmonious family atmosphere that Mrs. Lee had worked years to build was shattered by a few carelessly spoken words. This experience taught Mrs. Lee a valuable lesson about the dangers of social gatherings where tongues run loose. She realized that in group settings, especially among people who don't know each other well, comments can be easily misunderstood, taken out of context, or deliberately twisted by those who enjoy stirring up drama. The elderly understand that words once spoken cannot be taken back. They've lived long enough to see how a single misunderstood comment can destroy relationships that took years to build. This wisdom leads many older adults to prefer quieter, more controlled social environments where they can better manage their interactions and avoid potential conflicts. Furthermore, as we age, we often become more direct in our communication style, having lost patience for social pleasantries and diplomatic language. While this honesty can be refreshing, it can also be misinterpreted as rudeness or criticism by those who don't understand the speaker's intentions. Economic disparities and social discomfort. One of the more subtle but significant reasons why elderly people avoid frequent visiting relates to economic differences between families. In today's society, economic inequality has become more pronounced, and these differences can create uncomfortable dynamics during social visits. When families with vastly different economic circumstances interact regularly, it can lead to feelings of inadequacy, jealousy, or discomfort on both sides. The wealthier family might unintentionally display their prosperity through their home, possessions, or lifestyle choices, making their less fortunate guests feel self-conscious or envious. Conversely, wealthier hosts might feel awkward about their advantages or worry that their guests feel uncomfortable in their environment. These dynamics can poison what should be enjoyable social interactions, turning them into exercises in social comparison and psychological discomfort. Mr. Zhang, a retired factory worker, experienced this firsthand when he began regularly visiting his former colleague, who had been more successful in business. While their friendship was genuine, Mr. Zhang found himself constantly aware of the differences in their living situations, the expensive furniture, the latest gadgets, the casual mentions of expensive vacations and purchases. "I started to feel small in his house," Mr. Zhang admits. "Every visit reminded me of what I hadn't achieved in life. It wasn't his fault. He never made me feel unwelcome, but I couldn't help comparing our situations. I realized that for my own peace of mind, it was better to meet him at neutral locations like restaurants or parks. This kind of social comparison can be particularly painful for elderly people who may be living on fixed incomes and watching their contemporaries enjoy financial advantages they never achieved. The elderly have learned that protecting their mental peace often means avoiding situations that trigger these uncomfortable comparisons. Additionally, economic differences can create practical problems during visits. Hosts might feel obligated to provide expensive refreshments or entertainment, while guests might feel pressure to reciprocate with gifts or gestures they can't afford. These financial pressures can transform friendly visits into sources of stress and anxiety, the physical and emotional toll of hosting. From the host's perspective, there are equally compelling reasons why elderly people prefer not to receive frequent visitors. As we age, the physical and emotional energy required to properly host guests becomes increasingly burdensome, even when the visitors are welcome friends or family members. Preparing for guests requires cleaning, cooking, shopping, and organizing, activities that may have been effortless in younger years but become tiring and stressful as we age. For elderly people dealing with health issues, mobility problems, or simply the natural decline in energy that comes with age, the prospect of hosting can be overwhelming. Mrs. Chen, now 70, explains her perspective. "I love my friends and family, but having people over isn't as simple as it used to be. I worry about whether the house is clean enough, whether I have the right food to serve, whether my guests are comfortable. By the time they leave, I'm exhausted and need days to recover." Beyond the physical demands, there's also the emotional labor involved in being a good host. Elderly people often feel pressure to be on during visits, entertaining, engaging, and ensuring their guests have a good time. This performance can be draining, especially for those who are dealing with their own health concerns, grief, or life transitions. Moreover, elderly hosts may worry about practical concerns that younger people don't consider. What if a guest has an accident in their home? What if they serve food that doesn't agree with someone? What if they can't hear properly and miss important parts of conversations? These anxieties can make hosting feel more like a minefield than a pleasure. There's also the issue of different expectations and standards. Younger visitors might not understand why their elderly hosts seem flustered by impromptu visits or why they need more notice to prepare. This generational gap in expectations can create tension and misunderstandings that make social interactions less enjoyable for everyone involved. The wisdom of selective solitude. Perhaps the most important reason why elderly people become more selective about their social interactions is their hard-earned understanding of the value of peace and tranquility. After decades of navigating complex relationships, workplace politics, family dynamics, and social obligations, many older adults reach a point where they prioritize inner peace above social expectations. This doesn't mean they become hermits or reject all human contact. Instead, they become more intentional about their relationships, choosing quality over quantity and depth over breadth. They've learned to distinguish between relationships that energize them and those that drain them, between social obligations that bring joy and those that create stress. The elderly understand that time is finite and precious. Rather than filling their days with superficial social interactions, they prefer to spend their time in ways that bring genuine satisfaction, whether that's quiet contemplation, meaningful conversations with close friends, pursuing hobbies, or simply enjoying the peace of their own homes. This selective approach to socializing is often misunderstood by younger people, who may interpret it as antisocial behavior or depression. However, it's actually a sophisticated form of self-care that comes from deep self-knowledge and life experience. Dr. Martinez, a geriatrician who has worked with elderly patients for over 20 years, explains, "What people often don't understand is that this withdrawal from frequent social visiting isn't pathological. It's adaptive. Elderly people have learned what works for them and what doesn't. They're protecting their energy, their peace of mind, and their autonomy." Maintaining dignity and independence. Another crucial aspect of why elderly people avoid frequent visiting is their desire to maintain dignity and independence. As we age, we may become more aware of our limitations, physical, cognitive, or social, and worry about how these might be perceived by others. Visiting others' homes can make elderly people feel vulnerable. They may worry about needing help with stairs, having difficulty hearing conversations, needing frequent bathroom breaks, or simply not being able to keep up with the pace of social interaction. These concerns can make visiting feel like a test of their capabilities rather than an enjoyable social experience. At the same time, elderly people may be concerned about becoming burdensome to their hosts. They don't want to be seen as the guests, who need special accommodations, who require extra attention, or who can't fully participate in activities. This self-consciousness can make social visits feel more stressful than enjoyable. By limiting their visits to others' homes, elderly people can maintain greater control over their environment and social interactions. In their own homes, they know where everything is. They can manage their own needs without embarrassment, and they can end social interactions when they become tired without seeming rude. Conclusion: respecting the wisdom of age, understanding why. Elderly people become more selective about social. Visiting helps us appreciate the wisdom that comes with age and experience. Rather than viewing this behavior as antisocial or problematic, we should recognize it as a sophisticated form of self-care and boundary setting that develops over a lifetime of social learning. The elderly have earned the right to choose how they spend their time and energy. They've fulfilled decades of social obligations, raised families, built careers, and contributed to their communities. If they now prefer quiet evenings at home to frequent social visits, this choice deserves our respect and understanding. For younger people, these insights offer valuable lessons about the importance of being mindful and considerate in our social interactions. Before extending invitations or expecting regular visits, we should consider the perspective of our elderly friends and relatives. What seems like a simple social gesture to us might represent a significant commitment or source of stress for them. The key is to find ways to maintain meaningful connections while respecting the changing needs and preferences that come with age. This might mean meeting in neutral locations, keeping visits shorter and less frequent, or simply being more flexible and understanding about how our elderly loved ones choose to socialize. Ultimately, the wisdom behind avoiding frequent visiting in old age isn't about rejection or isolation. It's about choosing peace, preserving energy, and focusing on what truly matters in the precious time we have. It's a lesson we can all learn from, regardless of our age. If you found these insights valuable and they've changed your perspective on elderly social behavior, please let us know in the comments below. Understanding and respecting the wisdom of our elders is crucial for building stronger, more compassionate communities for people of all ages.